Today's unSeminary podcast episode is brought to you by Regal Theater Church, the only theater company providing full-service consultation for churches wanting to create dynamic worship services in familiar, culturally relevant venues, the local movie theater. With lots of parking, spacious lobbies, plenty of bathrooms, and a perfect view of the screen from a comfortable seat, Regal Theaters are ideal for church plants and multi-sites. Learn more at regaltheaterchurch.com or call their incredible team at 1-800-792-8244 today.
Ladies and gentlemen,
welcome to the unSeminary podcast. Are you looking for practical ministry help to drive your ministry further, faster? Have a sinking feeling that your ministry training didn't prepare you for the real world? Hey, you're not alone. Join thousands of others in pursuit of stuff that we wish they had taught in seminary. Buckle up and let's get started with this week's unSeminary podcast.
Well, hey everybody, welcome to the unSeminary podcast. My name's Rich, and I am so glad that you've decided to take some time out before we get into this weekend of ministry at your church to listen into today's podcast. You're going to be rewarded for that. We've got Ryan Visconti from Generation Church. This is a fantastic church in Arizona that you're going to want to learn more about it. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Hey, Rich. Thank you. Thanks for having me on your show, man. It's a privilege.
I've been looking forward to this. This is going to be great. Why don't you kind of give us a bit of the Generation story? Give me a sense of, kind of, if people were to show up this weekend, what would they experience? Tell us a bit of the story.
Well, my dad became the pastor of our church back in 1999, and it was about 70 to 80 people. Wow. With, little tiny facility and a lot of elderly people in the East Valley of Phoenix where a lot of people come to retire. And he just started doing really good stuff and doing a great job leading the church. And it started to grow, and they built some facilities, and they started to really get some momentum. And after they kind of peaked out, I would say at about the 400 to 500 person mark in regular attendance, they kind of started a subtle, slow decline. And I had left home to go into the Army as an Army officer and never was planning to be in ministry by any stretch. And unbeknownst to me, I was actually in Iraq, and I felt called into ministry, and I was not super pumped about it at first, let me tell you. But over time, God worked on my heart, and I knew this is what I was supposed to do. So I started, just asking for advice from my dad, and I don't know why I didn't think about it, but it was kind of a no-brainer in hindsight. But he wanted me to come work with him and see if, we could really do some things to turn the church around. And he was totally ready for that. It had started to decline, I would say slowly, for the last 4 or 5 years. And he was just willing and ready to make any changes necessary. So I came and started serving him as kind of like a right-hand man. And the church was maybe running about 300 people on Sunday at the time. And with his blessing, we just started, chopping things apart and stopping certain ministries, and kind of took a simple church approach to ministry where it was like we just focused primarily on the Sunday service experience, and that was our main focus. And so I think out of that, we started to see some turnaround and some growth. Then I was thinking about leaving to plant a church with my wife, but kind of unbeknownst to us, God just kind of set this whole thing in motion. We ended up relaunching the church that we were at there as Generation Church in January 2014. And me and my dad kind of co-pastored for about a year to have a season of transition. And we did something really unique where for that first season, we were like, let's start out and have him teach in a service on Sunday, and I'll teach in a service on Sunday. It's very unusual, but it allowed us to keep everyone that was already there in the church, them having to lose anything necessarily if they already loved the pastor that was there. And I was able to teach in a service, same worship style, basically. And our church started to grow out of that. And as it grew, we added services. First, we added another service for me to teach in. And then the following year, we added 2 other services, another traditional service and another PM service for me to teach in. So then we had 5 services going. And in just a couple years there, the church basically tripled in size. And it's been going really well since then.
That's amazing. And I think still, I was checking out your site, which is amazing, by the way. People should check it out. You guys have done a great job online. You still have like a traditional service and then a whatever you'd call a normal service or whatever that looks like. That's still a part of your deal?
Yeah, it is. And we actually really like it. And I feel even more committed to it as a strategy. The traditional service, started as a way to maintain what we had, and it's actually grown in this time over the last couple of years. It's probably grown 25 to 30% in just the last year.
Wow.
And so, we're reaching people in that service. We've been able to move them to another facility on our campus. So we have services going concurrently right now. And it allows us to reach different generations of people. Like families will show up and split, and some people will go over to our traditional service. Some people will come into our main service, and they'll take kids, and you'll have 3-4 generations of people at church. It's pretty cool.
Interesting. Well, there's a lot there. There's so much packed into your story. I'm like, gosh, where do we start? But why don't we talk a little bit about, some of the changes, even just the name Generation Church. You went through a rebranding process. You changed the name. What was that process look like? Why did you end up with Generation? What were some of your learnings through that?
Yeah, it's funny because that was my dad's idea, and I was like, I think it was a cool name, and I don't think church names are the most important thing in the world, but the church that existed previously had a reputation somewhat in the community, not really bad necessarily, but I felt like rebranding was going to not only give us a chance to start new, but also just kind of get some buzz going and kind of just quickly get back on track. And, that was a huge part of our strategy was social media, branding, and we're not the best at it by any means. We did it with very little resources to start out and just kind of tapped into like the natural abilities of the younger generation to try to make some things look more up to date. But I feel like that is one of the least talked about aspects of church growth strategy for like the medium-sized church. We started creating the perception that we were an exciting, growing church, and that it was dynamic. Honestly, even before it was happening, I think, via social media and pictures. And I would feel like we were still in the middle of just struggles and stuff, but I'd have friends coming up to me from around the valley here and just be like, man, it looks like amazing things are happening at your church. And it would just give me a little bit of a sense of how powerful
that's interesting.
That is, what you share and what you talk about online.
No, absolutely. I have a good friend of mine is church planning right now. And so that's been a fun process to kind of be back, listening to him. And he says the same thing. It's interesting. The way he speaks about social media, it's like, if you were planning a church 20 years ago, you'd say, well, we got to have a kids ministry. We got to do that. You can't not have a well-defined, kind of social media presence. What were some of the things you learned in that, that's kind of worked well in reaching out, using that to kind of impact your community?
Well, we learned first just by trial and error, and I've since then learned a lot of the things that we did wrong.
well, you got to share the wealth, man. Share the wealth.
Man. So, the first thing we did was just, creating a new website. And a lot of people, this is like no duh, but there's a lot of great free website platforms or very cheap platforms out there today. Yet you'll still see some people that just have honestly embarrassing websites, and that is the front door to your church. That, to me, your website is like your first line of your welcome team. And then online on social media, just trying to share wins and stories that revolve around people and life change. And every little thing does matter is something which I would say to our staff a lot along the way. It's like every little perception, the color of the building, your decorating in the building, what you post on social media, how you talk, how you communicate, it all creates an image. And I just like to say that it's kind of like little pixels of a greater image, and there's thousands of little perception points which all add up. And so when people are looking for a new church, or they wake up one day and they feel like something's missing in their life and they start looking around and Googling churches, you just want them to land on your stuff and, feel welcomed and like it's something worth checking out.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, in the the handover in the relationship with your dad, there must be a few tips in there that you could talk through. Because that I know a lot of churches are facing a succession. The fact that you ended up doing that transition with your dad is an interesting piece of the equation. But what did you learn even just in that succession that worked well? Sounded like the dual service thing that was good. Other pieces?
Yeah, the succession is a hot topic, I think, with pastors right now. And with my dad, I learned some really valuable lessons. And then now I'm going through it again with my father-in-law as his church in Phoenix is merging with us. We're actually voting on that this Sunday for them to become our second campus. And it's really exciting. But it's another element of the same succession dynamic. So, one of the things I found is that these older, pastors who are in place, maybe in their late 50s or 60s, who are starting to think about moving on. They're hitting that point where they're thinking about moving on, but they don't feel ready to let go, and they've got a lot of energy and passion a lot of times left. And another common issue is they can't afford to stop working because so many of them were underpaid for such a high, for a large part of their career. But what we kind of did, I think, is something that a lot of churches could tap into, where you can keep somebody on staff and keep them involved with ministry, and yet pass the baton to the next generation and allow them to really start driving the vision. And along the way, I would push really hard, and my dad would occasionally pull on the reins and just say, like, let's slow down a little on that. Looking back, that was really good. That was valuable, I think, to have a person driving the vision and another person with some wisdom and experience, just maybe cautioning along the way. That created a really potent dynamic there. So he was willing to push and let things change, which is something that not a lot of churches are willing to do. Not a lot of pastors are willing to step back from the lead role and let somebody else lead when, you could say they're kind of in the prime of their career still. But that's one of the things that my dad did that I think just was such a win, was he stepped back. He said, it's not about me. I remember him saying, I don't want to go to my grave and have it said that I was afraid to take a risk. And he just wanted to see more people come into the kingdom. And he felt like, he could see some of his dreams fulfilled through, the next person who happened to be his son. But it applies to anyone. And he was willing to go. So we had a lot of unanimity on our philosophy and our strategy. And I would say that if it was not like sinful, he was willing to give it a shot. So he was willing to really let me do stuff and push. And we know how sensitive it can be in churches when people start making changes and stuff, but it was really cool.
Interesting. Now, I know in a high growth situation like that, there is always a stretch on resources. Or are you the exception to the church where you just had like so much money you didn't know what to do with, so many people, you just were like, we got volunteers coming out the wazoo, we don't know what to do with them. How have you dealt with those pressures, the kind of pressures of growth, dealing with, we need more people, we need more resources? What are some of the lessons you've learned in that process?
Man, we definitely did not have a lot of resources, and I think that's because we were kind of on the decline. And then when we started growing quickly, some of those years we were growing at 45-50% per year, and I learned that it was pretty common with growth like that to have your income from giving be about a year behind. And that's what I found consistently, that our giving has been reflecting last year's average attendance. So at the beginning of the process, it was really tough. And we were kind of on the front end of that curve where, everything we did was a stretch. And there were many months where we were coming out in the red, and it was kind of scary. But there's a lot that you can do for affordably. I think there's a lot of free resources. And one of the things I would tell pastors in that situation who are trying to turn something around but they don't have a lot of resources is simple is better than complex when you don't have a lot of resources. Sure. So, go for the more simple stage design, go for the more simple branding package, keep it clean, which allows you to usually keep it cheap. And then, and we tried to capitalize on what we were strong at, and we didn't really apologize for the fact that we didn't offer every, auxiliary ministry. We just kind of started with the beginning, with the basics. And then as we grew, we kind of hit this tipping point recently where we started to have some more resources, but there were those points where we had to hire as a kind of a step of faith. And just kind of trust that we were making the right choice and trust that God would bring in the resources. Yeah,
why don't we talk a little bit about that? I know, because I've been there, where it's like the phrase I've used before is we're buying clothes that are a little too big. We got to fit into these clothes. It looks a little silly at the beginning, but we got to grow to make it happen. How did that balance out the kind of faith and then the pragmatic side of all of that to take some of those financial risks, hiring staff, which is a different kind of risk, because if it doesn't work, you're going to end up letting somebody go, and that's not great. What was going through your mind in that?
I think the key is if you're taking a step of faith like that, you'd want to make sure that you're already on the upswing, and that you've already got some signs of life and momentum going there, or else it could be a little too risky. I mean, we definitely had a few months where it was tight, and honestly, the first person was my dad, who said, I'll take a pay cut if we can't make ends meet, and he did some months. Wow. He was willing to do that, and I've seen that with several leaders in ministry. But I think there's a few key areas, of course, with preaching, worship, kids ministry, where you just have to be solid, and if you have to hire someone to strengthen up one of those areas, it's worth it. I think it's worth a step of faith, and you can't do everything at once, of course, but I would prioritize that. It just seems like worth investing in those areas.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, is there anything else you want to share before we move on with the rest of the episode?
Yeah, I think, growing in this role as a young lead pastor, I was 30 when I took over as the lead pastor, and I'm 32 now. And one of the principles I learned, I think going back to when I was a second lieutenant in the Army, was, if you're in charge, be in charge. And I meet a lot of leaders, I think, who are waiting for permission to do what they know they need to do. And I just have learned this, and I share it with my friends. Just do what you know you need to do. God's already given you permission to make the changes that you need to make. It's not easy, but that's why you're in that role, is to make those hard decisions, whether it's letting someone go or making a big change. Don't be afraid to make changes, and people are more willing to make changes than we think they are if you'll just give them a little bit of vision and why behind the change.
This is the unSeminary podcast. Stuff you wish they taught in seminary.
Well, we're going to jump into the lightning round, that part of the episode where we ask similar questions of everybody that's on the episode. Super excited to have Pastor Ryan Visconti today from Generation Church in Arizona. A great church that you really should be following and checking out. Ryan, what's an online resource that you're using these days that's helping you out?
Something I just started using with our staff is a program called Grammarly.
Oh, yes. Yes.
You install it on your computer, and it helps people with not just spell check, but also like grammar, and if you start overusing one word too often in your written communication. So I'm having people install that and use it, because we've got different degrees of ability when it comes to written communication there. So
that's fun.
Yeah.
What's a book you've read in the last, I don't know, maybe 6 months to a year that's impacted your impacted your thinking or ministry?
Right now I'm reading Money Matters by Steve Stroop for churches, and he has some just great stuff on capital campaigns and money management for lead pastors. And he talks about the fact that, you go through seminary, but you don't usually get taught how to manage money, especially in a large growing church. So I just learned that Steve Stroop out of Texas, he is a Yoda of finance. Totally. It's amazing. So that's been a huge win for me.
Yeah, we did some coaching with Steve for a while, and he's totally a Yoda. He's a great guy for sure. What's another ministry that you're looking at that inspires you?
I look at Elevation a lot, and of course I love Pastor Stephen's preaching and everything, but I really was blown away when I saw how they flow with their service, and just it's like maximum impact in the amount of time that they have you there. And it's a different type of model, I think, than kind of like how, let's say, Andy Stanley does church. So, to each his own, but it really resonated with me, like kind of the maximum impact that they make. And I come from like a spirit-filled background of church. So they do that, and it looks a little different in our context, but I just kind of love that they capture that dynamic, but in it's a way that's accessible to everybody. So I love those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the Pastor Steve and his team's incredible. If you could get 15 minutes with any leader alive, and this is a hard question, who would you want to get that with, and why?
I think I'd like to sit down with Craig Rochelle at this point. He is just like the most humble guy, it seems, and he has cracked so many issues that I'm facing right now. So I've been kind of drinking in his leadership podcast. I was a little late to the game. I'm a late adapter, I've realized. So I'm usually discovering things about a year after everybody else at best. So, we're trying to figure out this multi-site thing right now. And I know a lot of people are doing great at it. So he just seems to have learned a lot of great lessons about managing time and taking care of your family and taking care of yourself and your own walk with God that I'm trying to apply to my life.
Very cool. Well, I know leading a church like yours is a lot of work. It's a lot of, it's a lot of effort, and it can take a lot out of you. But what do you do for fun when you just want to kind of kick back, relax, enjoy life a little bit?
Netflix and chill, man. It's just
yeah, exactly.
Me and my wife love spend time together. I go and golf some.
Nice.
Just try to read and take my mind off of ministry. I think anything that lets you zone out and not think about the church for a little while is healthy.
Great. Good. Well, Ryan, I really appreciate you being on the show today. If people want to get in touch with you or with the church, what's the best way for them to do that? I'm on social media at Ryan Visconti and online, generation.church. They can find our website. But if they look for me, through that website, they'll find me, my email, my social media contact information. Great. Thanks so much, Pastor Ryan. I appreciate you being on the show. Thanks. Have a great week.
Thanks, Rich. I appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's unSeminary podcast. Don't be shy. We'd love to connect. Check out unSeminary Inbox. You can sign up at unSeminary.com, and we'll send you helpful training resources every week. Plus, you'll gain immediate access to our exclusive members area with tons of resources you can use. Connect with Rich on Twitter at Rich Birch or through email, rich@unseminary.com. Don't forget to check out the show notes for this episode at unseminary.com. It includes links to what we talked about today and more. Leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you. Did you enjoy today's episode? Drop by iTunes and leave a review. Thanks again for tuning in to this week's unSeminary podcast. Join us next week when we'll learn more stuff we wish they taught in seminary.